The world is entering a new energy era. For decades, the energy debate revolved around a single question: how to generate enough electricity for a constantly growing population. But today the challenge has changed. It is no longer just about supplying energy to homes or factories. We are building an entirely new economy driven by artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, automation, cryptocurrency, robotics, and massive data centers that operate 24/7. Every search, every video played, every conversation with an AI, and every electric vehicle plugged into a charger relies on an invisible infrastructure, the electrical grid. And that electrical grid is beginning to show signs of strain. Global electricity demand will grow over the coming decades. Entire countries are electrifying their transport, industry, and their heating systems. At the same time, artificial intelligence is driving a sharp rise in energy consumption at data centers. The result is simple: the world needs far more electricity. But generating more electricity is not so simple. For years, much of the growth in energy relied on fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. These sources remain fundamental to many economies, but also face pressures due to their carbon emissions, price volatility, and the geopolitical risks associated with their supply. Renewable energy sources, such as solar and wind, have experienced extraordinary growth and will continue to play a key role in the energy transition. However, they present a technical challenge. Their output depends on weather conditions. When there is insufficient sun or wind, it is necessary to rely on other generation sources or storage systems, which still entail high costs in many markets. This raises a question that governments, technology companies, and investors are beginning to ask: what energy source can generate large amounts of electricity continuously, 24 hours a day, with low carbon emissions? The response brings back to the forefront a technology that many considered a thing of the past: nuclear energy. After decades marked by some accidents, controversies, and strong public opposition in many countries, nuclear energy is regaining prominence, not because the debate over its risks has totally vanished, but because the global context is changing. That shift is already being felt in financial markets. Uranium-related companies, reactor manufacturers, developers of new nuclear technologies, and specialized funds have begun to attract renewed interest. Not every project will succeed, and the sector continues to face significant risks, but one thing seems clear: the market is once again paying attention to an industry that had remained in the background for years. Before talking about investments, stocks, or the price of uranium, it is worth understanding what nuclear energy is and why it has once again become such a strategic resource. Many people first associate it as a kind of bright green fluid with accidents or nuclear weapons, but the reality is that most of the world's nuclear energy has a much simpler purpose: to produce electricity. Its operation, in essence, is not so different from that of a conventional power plant. Everything begins with a small fuel called uranium. Uranium is a metal that is found naturally in the Earth's crust. After being extracted from mines and processed, it is turned into small fuel pellets that, despite their small size, concentrate a huge amount of energy. These pellets are introduced into the core of a nuclear reactor. There, a phenomenon called nuclear fission occurs. In simple terms, some uranium atoms split into smaller fragments. Each time this happens, they release a huge amount of heat and at the same time produce more neutrons that cause new splits in other atoms. This process generates a carefully controlled chain reaction within the reactor. The heat produced does not generate electricity directly. What it does is heat water until it turns into steam. That steam moves enormous turbines connected to electric generators, just like in many coal, gas, or even some concentrated solar power plants. In other words, the electricity does not come from radiation, but from the movement of a steam-driven turbine. The difference is the way that heat is produced. While a coal power plant obtains it by burning fossil fuel and a gas plant burns natural gas, a nuclear power plant obtains heat through the fission of uranium atoms. One of the great advantages of the system is its energy density. A relatively small amount of fuel can generate enormous volumes of electricity for long periods. That's why a nuclear power plant can operate continuously for months before needing to replace part of its fuel. The nuclear industry operates like an ecosystem. Behind every power plant, there is a chain of companies dedicated to raw material extraction, fuel processing, reactor design, engineering, maintenance, and electricity generation. Each one represents a distinct opportunity for investors, but it also involves different risks. Everything begins with uranium. Without this mineral, there is simply no fuel for nuclear reactors. Mining companies are responsible for exploring and extracting uranium, which will later be processed to become nuclear fuel. Demand is usually stable. A nuclear power plant needs uranium constantly to operate. It can't just turn off the reactor if the price goes up. And in turn, the supply of uranium itself may take time to appear. Opening or reactivating a uranium mine doesn't happen overnight. When there is a deficit, the price skyrockets because the supply takes a long time to react. The issue is that the price of uranium is volatile because the market cannot adjust flexibly. It's an all-or-nothing game. Either there's an oversupply of uranium and no one needs that much, or there's a slight shortage and everyone desperately needs it yesterday. There is no middle ground, and this directly affects the uranium extraction companies. These companies develop the technology used in nuclear power plants. Some build traditional reactors, while others are focusing on small modular reactors, also known as SMRs, which are considered a potential evolution of the industry. The historical big problem with nuclear energy was the conventional giant reactors. They took 15 years to build and cost tens of billions of dollars. Today, the industry is turning to SMRs. They are much smaller reactors that are mass-produced in a factory and transported by truck or train to the final site. This drastically reduces initial costs, construction times, and financing risks. While uranium is a short/medium-term commodity bet, reactor manufacturers are a long-term bet on technology, infrastructure, and secular growth. It is a sector that is currently experiencing a historic renaissance, but that structurally manages complex dynamics. There is an extreme regulatory risk. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or its international equivalents, scrutinize every screw, so it is something to keep in mind. If mining companies extract the fuel and engineering firms design the tech, utilities are the ones that actually own the nuclear power plants, run the day-to-day operations, and sell the electricity. Historically, utilities were considered boring, slow-growth investments bought only for their stable dividends. However, the artificial intelligence boom has completely transformed this sector. Today, these companies are signing massive multi-billion-dollar energy deals directly with big tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. Technology companies desperately need 24/7 energy to power their massive AI data centers, and operational nuclear plants are one of the few sources on Earth that can provide it immediately. Utilities are mature businesses that are already generating enormous amounts of cash flow. They don't need to wait a decade to build a new reactor from scratch to profit. They are already capitalizing on their existing assets through premium power contracts. Building or owning a power plant is just the beginning. For decades, it needs constant maintenance, modernization, inspections, safety systems, and specialized fuel management. Service companies specialize exactly in that background work. They don't design nuclear technology from scratch. Their business consists of making what already exists work safely, efficiently, and legally. Their services are divided into maintenance and operation, lifetime extension, and waste management. One of my favorite things about these is that, unlike a construction company whose income depends on winning a giant bid every few years, service companies live off multi-year maintenance contracts. Nuclear power plants sign support agreements for 5, 10, or even 20 years. This turns their income into something very similar to a mandatory recurring corporate subscription. Investing here is buying the full package of the nuclear renaissance. However, not all ETFs are the same. Some focus purely on the raw material, while others include the utilities and engineering companies we just mentioned. The market is mainly divided into 3 large funds that are listed on U.S. exchanges. It is the largest and oldest ETF in the sector. It's a hybrid. It has massive exposure to major uranium mining companies, but it also includes a significant percentage of nuclear component companies, construction firms, and engineering companies. This fund is managed by Sprott, one of the most respected commodity investment firms in the world. It is a pure ETF of mining and physical uranium. Unlike URA, this fund does not invest in heavy engineering or utilities. It only holds giant mining companies, medium/small mining companies, and shares of the fund itself that stores physical uranium. This is a different approach. It focuses mainly on operational nuclear power plants and engineering service companies. It has very little weight in uranium mining companies, meaning it benefits directly from energy contracts with big tech for AI. No massive investment thesis comes without structural risks. For all its promise, the nuclear sector carries liabilities that regular tech or energy markets rarely have to face. 1. Extreme regulatory and political risk. The nuclear industry is hyper-regulated. Government bodies scrutinize every single operational detail. A sudden shift in political leadership or public policy can stall or completely shut down projects overnight. 2. Long and expensive constructions. Unlike a solar park or a wind farm, a nuclear power plant is not built in 1 or 2 years. Many projects require between 8 and 10 years, or even more, from the time they break ground until they produce their first kilowatt of electricity. During that decade-long window, delays, technical hurdles, and soaring material or labor costs can easily destroy initial financial projections. 3. Accidents and public perception. Although modern nuclear accidents are remarkably infrequent, their geopolitical and psychological impact is devastating. Events like the Chernobyl disaster or the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster completely shifted the world's perception of this technology for a generation. In financial markets, a single major incident anywhere on the globe can trigger massive capital flight and send sector stocks tumbling, even for companies with no direct connection to the event. Nuclear energy presents some of the greatest capital hurdles and structural challenges of any energy industry on Earth. It is capital-intensive, heavily regulated, and deeply dependent on political climates, technological breakthroughs, and commodity volatility. However, it has also become the bedrock of a trend that many experts consider completely inevitable: the explosive, exponential growth of global electricity demand. In this new landscape, nuclear energy finds itself at the center of an inevitable conflict, caught between the demands of an energy-hungry planet and the relentless financial and political barriers that threaten to stifle its viability. It is up to each person to evaluate what has been presented, and of course, I encourage you to do further research. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to check out the rest of my content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.